Welcome back to another Let's Play Sierra Games commentary. This time I'm going to cover Police Quest 4 Open Season. Although technically nowhere in the game is it actually called Police Quest 4, it's actually just called Police Quest, and then Open Season is the title of the game. So this is, before I get into that, go ahead and shine up your badge real nice. Press it up against the like button until the like button is highlighted. And then go ahead and take your handcuffs and wrap those around the subscribe button and go ahead and put the subscribe into the back seat of the car and make sure it is taken to jail where everyone else can see the subscribe button and charge it for basically subscribing. Yeah, so like, subscribe, do something fun, do something cool. But all of that out of the way, let's talk about Police Quest 4 Open Season. This is the first game, be the first and last actually, that will be called Police Quest. It is what I was going to say. It's the first game where it is no longer about Sonny Bonds. It becomes about the homicide detective John Kerry, and it's also no longer based in the fictional city of Layton. It's actually based out of Los Angeles, California, and the game actually uses like digital photographs for some of the graphics, as you can see here with the deceased body, rather than like a painted look that we saw like in Police Quest 3. And also, this game is the first that uses exclusively the point and click. It actually has zero typing, which at times proved to be a little frustrating when I was trying to do something that I knew what I needed to do, but could not figure out how the game wanted me to do it. Um, it's also the first game where you will see it's probably not so noticeable when it's sped up the way it is, but if you watch the long play, which is almost 8 hours long, I don't recommend it because that's a long time to be sitting down and watching me struggle through Police Quest. Um, but a lot of times you'll see that I move the cursor up thinking that's where the menu is because that's what I'm used to. Police Quest 1 through 3 all had the menu at the top. Most of the Sierra games had the menu at the top. It's only like Police Quest 4 and later games, for example, Phantasmagoria and Torrance Passage and stuff like that, and Gabriel Knight, that would eventually move the menu stuff to the bottom. So there's a few times where you see me move the cursor up and it kind of hangs there for a second, and then I realize, oh wait, I have to go to the bottom. So there was a few differences like that I went through while playing Police Quest Open Season, and that's probably because I've been playing 1, 2, 3 back to back, so I was so used to just going up to the top for the menu. So it starts off with the detective John Kerry. He arrives at the scene of a murder scene, and it is actually his partner who'd been working undercover pretty much, and he's been murdered. But not only that, you find a child has also been murdered in the dumpster. And what's really weird here is you look at the wall, there's graffiti where it's like, um, stands for Rich Boys Get Bail, so RBGB. And you'll eventually go back to the police station and look up about this gang and stuff like that. But nowhere in this game does the gang actually tie into anything. There is a good possibility that I missed some points because as I was playing, there is no like you earn X amount out of so many points. You never see what the maximum points are in this game. But I am absolutely certain that I missed a bunch of stuff. For example, when I opened up the kit, one of the things that you get is the plastic gloves. I don't think I used those once in this game. So anyway, you are Detective Carey. Your partner's been murdered. There is a dead kid in the dumpster who looks like he was gunned down. Your boss basically says, hey, I know you're really close to this, but I'm going to assign you to it. Don't F it up. And just like the other Police Quest games, this game relies heavily on doing things according to procedure. And so you'll want to fill out forms and fill it out put whenever you see something or talk to someone that gives you any relevant kind of information, you essentially click your notebook on them. And one of the annoying things is your notebook ends up near the bottom of your inventory. So every time you get a few things and you've talked to someone, you have to scroll down, get your notebook, click on them to basically make it do the bling to know that you've gathered and written down notes and stuff like that. One thing I will say is, and this is no slight to the narrator of the game, but he eventually did get on my nerves fairly quickly when it's telling me obvious things. Like every time I press the button, he goes, Carrie, you press 3 and go to the 3rd floor. Like every single time, like I didn't feel like that was necessary. And sometimes when I off clicked on something, like I'm trying to click to see if it's something, it just gives a snarky remark of what you see is what you get. And so there were just a lot of times that the narrator was grating my nerves. And there's also a point later on in this game where I'm talking to a guy named Yo Money. And so there's music playing in his house, and it's louder than what the narrator is saying. And in the controls, you can see that you can raise the volume, but it's the volume for both. It's raising both music and narrator at the same time. It would have been nice to essentially be able to split the two so that you can lower the music and up the narrator, or just lower the music so you can hear the narrator more clearly, because there were times in the game that hearing the narrator was difficult. And so there's a portion in the game that might not be noticeable in the sped up version where I turned the music, or I turned all the volume on and just made it text so that I could actually hear what was being said. And so right now where we're at is we're at the computer. We're looking into the gang signs and stuff like that to find out the information on how to log into this computer. You would think this guy has logged into his computer many times that this shouldn't be a part of figuring out how or why your username and password is, but your username is basically the badge number, which is 612, and the password is in the photo. When you look at your desk, you find a photo of you and your partner, and the word gunner is scribbled on the bottom, and that's your password. But nowhere does it give you any indication, like when you look at the photo or when you look at the badge, it doesn't say anything like, this is your username to log into the computer, Carrie, or this is your password. So right there, like where it says RBGB, you hear the shing for points, but I don't get why. Like nowhere really. There is an issue that comes up about the gangs and stuff like that where you end up in a shootout, but that whole part feels unnecessary to me in this game and doesn't really tie in to the main story of you're trying to track down who the hell killed your partner, and did it in such a brutal manner that they can't remember if it was him or one of the other ones, but they essentially glued his eyes shut. And then he had a bunch of burn marks on his skin that looked like, someone had taken a cigarette or something and burned him multiple times and stuff like that. So there was aspects of this game that I felt like weren't needed. Um, and I felt like they were just thrown in there to make the game longer. And so this part of the portion I'm probably going to speed up. What I did is, because not knowing what's on what floor, I literally went from the 8th floor down to the 7th to the 6th, and I just made my way down to see what floors I can actually get off on and make note as to what is on what floor. I will say one thing that, to add to this, to fill dead air, is Police Quest 4 was under a lot of controversy for the way the African American characters were written. Like they'd have characters that be, yo, I be chill, and they'd say things like, yo, I'm fly. And this got a lot of criticism, where Daryl Gates, whose name was being slapped on this game as, like the main writer behind it, was like, no, you've got the dialogue wrong. That's not like how these people talk. They talk like you and I. He basically said, I specifically reached out to Sarah and says, hey, this isn't right. Like, this needs to be changed. But the actual person who penned and wrote the story was someone by the name of Tammy Dargan, and she used to work as a producer on America's Most Wanted, and she claimed that it was inspired by something called Fab Five Freddy's, and it's called Fresh by Flavor. So this is something I've never heard of, and I only know because I had searched for it before about some of the controversy that came out of this. I mean, Daryl Gates would end up in his own controversy later. I think like a year or two later after this game came out, the whole Rodney King thing happened, at which time Daryl Gates was still the police chief in Los Angeles, and he was severely criticized for the way he handled all of that. So it's not like, people might say he's a saint that he tried to change his game beforehand. He had his own issues also, and probably there was no easy way to go through all of this and come out clean. Um, so anyway, going back to the game, you do some research, you come out, there's a reporter, and there's a couple things you can do. You can talk to her, or you can shove her, which I thought was the funnier response because she's trying to get you to comment on it. And you don't want to comment because your police chief says, watch what you say to the media, do not expose any information. So I basically did the shove, which comes back to bite you because you get in trouble. And now this woman, every time you come here to the morgue, she needs to see your badge. Even though she knows who you are, she greets you as, Detective Carey, but she insists on seeing your badge because that's the policy. And now when you look at her, she looks like, I don't want to say like an older woman, but like her hairstyle seems like she's more uptight. But later on, you'll see that she and the lead mortician, this gentleman here, they seem to have a relationship because there's a point where she's sitting on that very same table and she's got a fairly tight dress on when she jumps off the table and was like, oh, I'll go back to what I was doing. So anyway, you come here and you talk to the mortician and you ask him information about your partner about, hey, tell me about the glue, tell me about the wounds, tell me about the lividity. So they go really into depth about the different information you can find. Now, unfortunately, a lot of this stuff actually never really surfaces because like he talks about like, hey, from what I can tell, it looks like he was poisoned, and I've sent it in, whatever, to get the poison examined. There's thousands and thousands of types of poison. We may actually never know what kind of poison it is. And as the days go by, because this happens like basically Monday, and I think it ends on a Thursday. So not only do you get involved in a case, but you manage to solve it in 4 days, which is pretty amazing for a cop to figure out a serial killer in 4 days, because most serial killers become serial killers because they're able to keep killing for a long distance of time and usually don't kill back to back to back to back. So there's just a lot of stuff that never comes to. For example, the poison. They never describe what was used for the poison to poison two cops to take him down. And I believe like two other victims end up, or I think it ends up a total being of three, but you catch the fifth victim basically already being killed. But they never talk about what the poison is. Like I was expecting that they would eventually reveal what the poison is. They just reveal, we know it's not a synthetic drug. It's something natural. But nowhere do you get the opportunity to find out what this poison is. And when you find out, or when you start to suspect who the killer is, which also seemingly comes fairly fast all of a sudden, or I'm just maybe super dense and didn't put it all together as to how they're making these leaps. There's no indication how this guy has knowledge of different poisons. Like, I feel like there were so many missed opportunities in this game where when you get the files on some of the people, um, one of them being who eventually becomes the killer, there should have been something in there that talked about his his ability to work with nature, or he used to be a gardener at this place, something that would indicate that he was familiar with plants. If this is a natural poison, something along those lines that would have helped kind of make that leap to say, okay, well, this guy used to basically work with flowers and stuff like that, different types of flowers, because there are a ton of flowers that are poisonous, ironically totally unrelated. I recently ran a game of D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, where the party goes to this carnival, and there's, I want to say, 12 children, and they're all named after different flowers that are actually poisonous. So I know for a fact there's a number of different flowers that are poisonous just from a D&D game that I had made, and I wanted to make these characters have these seemingly normal names, but when you look deeper into it, they're all named after poison flowers or poison plants. So I know there's a bunch of different types of poisons out there, but there's no indication to make that jump that this guy who is super timid, he has a stuttering problem, and he just seems super nervous, manages to get two cops to die in his hands, which you get that he poisoned them and how he does it. But you have, when you have his file, there's no information in there that indicates that he would have any knowledge of poison or plants or anything like that. So that was just one of the weird jumps that they made, um, where it just seems like some information just got lost. And I was just thinking, you know, the two cops who end up dead as victims. We already see the first victim in the alley. Like, why wasn't there also maybe some subtle clues that, hey, these guys used to relax. They used to go to the Third Eye Theater, or whatever it's called. I believe it's called Third Eye Theater, which could have a sexual reference to a third eye. Some people could say. I don't know. That's what I assumed when I saw the name of the theater. I thought, oh, it's like an adult theater, but it turns out it's just a theater that shows old movies, which I don't know why it's called Third Eye, but whatever. Anyway, but it would have been kind of cool to read something in their files that, hey, Officer XYZ and Officer ABC frequently went to the Third Eye Theater to relax on their days off, or something, like even if it happened in conversation with another officer or something like that. So you kind of see like these pieces adding to something like, hey, these officers frequently went to this theater. The guy who basically manages this theater, this quiet, timid, stuttering guy, has experience in dealing with plants and different types of, poisons maybe through these plants. Maybe I can make that leap that these two officers who both died have something in common. They both went to this theater. This guy at this theater is familiar with plants, maybe familiar with how to create a poison from these different plants. Now I'm making that connection, that leap that could be there. So it was just a bunch of things like that that I thought they could have greatly improved how all of this nicely comes together, but they don't. They just leave everything very ambiguous. And there's the issue with like the street gangs and stuff like that. And there's even an issue when we get to Yo Money, basically about like a Nazi racism guy, which really doesn't play too much into it. Um, into the overall story, I should say. It's just one random story where now you have to go to court, and this guy tries to attack you during a thing where you're talking to the city about the town, the whole city of Los Angeles under the fear of a serial killer, and he appears there to try to kill you. And so, right here, where I'm at right now, this is one of those places where typing would have been much nicer, because you're trying to use this tiny scraper from this kit right here, this thing, and you're trying to pull bullets out. So I know what I'm trying to do, but he keeps saying, Carrie, what are you trying to do? Carrie, you've got to be more specific. And you've got to align it just right on these little holes to pop these things out. So I literally just kept clicking until it finally pulled the bullet out, because I knew what I was trying to do. Like if you click the hand on it, it says, oh, the bullet's too far wedged in there. You need something to pull it out. So I knew I needed this to pull it out, but half the time it was like, Carrie, try to be more specific on what you're trying to do. And I'm like, just use this to get bullets. Done. It would have been so much easier. And then after you do it, you have to use the bag to basically start collecting all the bullets. And you have to do the same thing, essentially click on all the holes to collect all the bullets. So there was just times that the game was somewhat monotonous, like things like that just could have been somehow done easier. So, um, what I was talking about with the, I guess they call it jive talk or whatever, and the way they portrayed African Americans. This is one of those guys where he's like, "I'm so fly," or whatever, or "I be fly," or "I be Theodore the Third," or something like that. The way they do the dialogue. And so basically, you talk to these two guys, and the guy standing up says, "You know what? He eventually will agree to help you after you show him a badge, talk to him, but they already know you're quote unquote the heat." And even the stance is so stereotypical of how they would portray African Americans, like, this like hip hop swaying move, and the other guy crouched down with a brown bag in his hand, just swinging his hand up and down. You could tell this could have been done a little bit better than how it was, especially nowadays. Like probably back then, it was probably not such a hot topic as it is nowadays, the way people are portrayed. But this is another example where you come across and it's a drunk African American dude who happened to be at the crime scene earlier. If you watch back when you first arrive, he's over to the right. Not the guy leaning against the fence, but he's over to the right talking to one of the officers, and you can tell because he's wearing the same shirt and bandana. So essentially, you just keep trying to talk to him, and he eventually will ask you for change, and you give him some change, and he'll give you a little bit of information, but then he's so drunk that he basically does not finish his sentence. So he provides very little information. And talking to the guy on the phone will get you no results, even if you show your badge. He's like, "Yo, I can tell your heat. I'm on an important phone call." I do wonder, like, how many people might watch this now and be like, "Oh, is that a payphone?" And I do like how when you are here in this grocery store, you see on the news basically you and the reporter and you shoving her. Now, one of the things that's super obvious is, like most hero games, you just want to click on everything. But like the apples that are on the counter are super obvious because they kind of stick out. Like, why do they have apples on the counter? Um, just really unusual. So clearly, you take an apple. But thankfully, I went ahead and started clicking on like the chips over here to the left and the different things on the right for candy and stuff like that. And it gives you comments like, "Carrie, this is no time to be grabbing candy." And so one of the things that is well hidden over to the right on the little shelf, not that's on the counter, but like next to the candy, is glue, which in the end doesn't really prove to be much because they do say later on, yeah, the glue is pretty similar, but it's an industrial glue that not only found everywhere, but we also use it. But the glue ends up being used for another item to create another item, which I just randomly clicked together because I remember something with the glue and the broken mirror, and you end up finding basically quote unquote a stick. So it was something super random. Um, we'll get to that. Now, I thought personally it was weird that there's just a little girl sitting on a sidewalk away from everything, and she's just rocking this toy back and forth, saying that she's pretending to be a mama. Like, where is her mom? Thankfully, she's only one screen away. But I just thought it was weird that why'd they put her like on the middle of the street or on the middle of the sidewalk, not near anything, just by herself? Like, why didn't they put like a rundown playground if they're trying to portray like a rundown neighborhood where it'd be more logical to find a child playing with a toy? Or why not just have her be in her mom's front yard, like right here, just where you just talk to her here? And when you come here, this turns out to be the mother of the deceased child that was found in the dumpster. So from the morgue, you basically get the belongings and you give it to her and say, this is what he had. Now, one of the things that I can't tell if I missed a point somewhere or something, but she does talk about her deceased son's obsession with baseball and that he enjoyed playing ball. That's all he pretty much did all the time. And one of the two African American people that when you came out through that door where I was talking about how they were portrayed very generic in their jive talk and all that stuff and their stance, the one who agrees to help you, he's flipping a ball up and down in the air and he literally says, finders keepers. So you kind of feel like he might somehow be tied to it, right? Like he's got a hand in killing this kid and he basically took the baseball after killing the kid. But that literally did not dawn on me until after the game and I was watching my playthrough again and I realized, oh, him with the baseball probably meant he took it from the kid when he was either responsible or part of the shootout. But then what doesn't make sense is he gets shot. So he's not part of it after all, because when you go to talk to him and meet with him, he gets shot. So I don't get it. It was something weird. I don't understand. A lot of the things in this game in Police Quest 4 had me scratching my head like, why? And that's another thing. So when you come out of the elevator, you can put loose change in that thing, and you can buy a chocolate bar or whatever. I think it's just your only option is like a chocolate bar. And so for this whole game, I'm carrying around a chocolate bar that I actually never used. I don't know if like it was just like a alternative way to use something because later on in the game you'll get pretzels and you can throw the pretzels to a dog, but you're not going to want to throw a chocolate bar to a dog because chocolate is typically toxic to dogs. So I don't know if you maybe give the chocolate to the child um, to make her talk or something like that. Like, hey, I got a candy bar because I'm not creepy by giving you a candy bar. Which I don't know. So if anyone knows what the chocolate bar is for, because I did this without going through a walkthrough, um, I would love to hear about it in the comments because I still don't know what the chocolate bar is for. And I'm just going to move on from Police Quest. Probably next, I'll probably do Gabriel Knight. So every time you find something, um, you can either bring it to her, she'll talk about it, but usually you want to go upstairs and drop it. I think he's on the fourth floor. I'd have to look at my notes again. I think he's on the fourth floor, which is where you want to deliver the evidence. And there are times where she says the proper thing to do is go drop this off to just whatever, Officer XYZ over in evidence, and then he'll put in the paperwork for it. So I think he was on the fourth floor. And this is something that was weird. So it looks like if you walk forward, the hall like it's closed, but when you go there, it's open. So there was just parts of this game that seemed so weird. Like if you look down that hall, that door looks closed, but you walk over there and it's open. So you can also ask him about some of the evidence that you've turned in, and every time you turn in evidence, he'll ask you a series of questions. And then he says, I'll have this form filled out in a second. So I was thinking I need to take this form, but there's nothing you can do to take the form. So that was one of the other things. Like if you click on your desk with the hand icon, it goes, oh, it's your own desk, Carrie. If you just click the eye on it, he'll just go and sit down. So essentially, every chance you get after you do, and if you talk to anyone, just try to combine your notes with the whatever form that you get from your drawer that you give to your partner who is standing up right there, not the guy on the phone, but the other guy, and he'll research stuff for you and try to make contacts for you. And he also, as you can see, you can talk to him about some of the things that you've turned in evidence for to see if he has further information. And it's funny, if you do hand him the form and it's blank, you haven't written any notes, he will scorn you and say, "I'm not going to do everything for you, man." The one thing I will say that I really did enjoy about this game is that there was no driving. There was literally no driving in this game. Unlike Police Quest 1 and essentially 3, I could not stand the driving. Like in 1, you're just that little stick thing, and I frequently crash. If you watch my video, I crashed a lot to the point where I started laughing. Police Quest 2 made it a lot easier. You just type where you're driving, and it just starts driving. And I thought that was probably the best version of it, because there would be times that you'd get a call and you'd need to change the course of where you're driving. So like you might be heading for a warehouse and says, "Oh, hey, Sonny, we got news that, Bane's car was seen at the airport." See? And this is what I was talking about. So the guy with the baseball, who I was thinking, "Oh, maybe, yeah." And then I thought, "Wait a minute, no." He actually gets gunned down, so he's not behind it. So on the scene, what you want to do is put on the Kevlar vest that is given to you by your partner's um, wife when you go and visit her, and you want to edge your way over to the trunk, use the keys on the trunk. You have to unlock the trunk, and not only that, you have to click the keys on the shotgun to unlock the shotgun, and then you can start shooting at them. And I had a heck of a time because um, there was a mouse delay, but I managed to get it like in 3 shots or whatever. But there was a mouse delay, and it's especially noticeable when I'm at the gun range, because on Wednesday, one of the things your chief here says is like your gun scores have been really low. Get to the range, get some practice in, and then on Wednesday you have to do your test. And I don't know what the score is to pass the test, so I just went every time the target showed up, because I was having such a delay trying to get it to settle correctly. I just unloaded my gun, like gung, 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 and tried to hit as many times as I could to get as many points as I could. So your boss does yell at you about how you've created a nightmare by the way you treated the um, the person trying to get the interview from you, and like everyone's breathing down his neck now. Go out and make things right. Don't f things up any further than you already have. But he also says make sure you don't divulge any information. So essentially, every day that starts, make sure you just go to your desk, grab the form, and when you go about, just make sure you click your notebook on everyone. And whether or not they gave you good information or not, it'll tell you, like, hey, this guy gave you no good information. Don't worry about it. But in the end, I honestly don't know if any of that matters. Like, if I didn't click my notebook on anyone just by random chance, would it have really mattered? Like me not filling out this form and giving it to this guy, would it have had an impact? Or did I just need to find out who the killer was and, in the end, find a way to defeat him with the items? Because in the end, the way this game ends, it is a very final ending for the person behind the murders. I'll just leave it at that. So I don't even know if it would have mattered if I gathered all this information or not, in terms of clicking on people and giving my partner the form to do research. I mean, the only thing I would have imagined is it would have impacted what questions I would have been able to ask individuals, such as Chester, who we learn her name is Julie. And apparently these two have a romantic connection, which you can almost tell because the first time you talk to her, like the music kind of changes and kind of goes to a more romantic kind of vibe. And so he goes from calling her Chester to calling her Julie or Julia. I can't remember which one it is. Now it's hard to tell in this in the sped up version, but every time I walk out of the Parker Center in that I know the cop is waving and it's supposed to be like his two fingers are up, like, hey, peace. But it honestly looks like he's flipping me off every time I leave. What's funny is if you show him your badge, he goes, yeah, I get it. You're a detective and I'm not. So he sounds very bitter about the fact that he's not a detective. And the notion that maybe he's flipping you off doesn't seem that far off. So when you look at the bushes, there's a red shoe. And uh, again, the shoe and how it plays out is so weird. So we're at Yo Money's house, by the way, um, who is a international rap star. And Yo Money's girlfriend, if you notice, is wearing a red dress. And one of the things they talk about is this killer wore a red dress and she had these red shoes. What's so weird is a little bit later, we'll get there. You end up at basically a strip club, and when you talk to one of the, I think she is a proprietor, the owner of the strip club. I think it's her that mentions it, not the other dancer. Um, she essentially says, "Oh, I've heard that this woman has an incredible body and she's gorgeous and stuff like that." And when you find out who the killer is, you've got to ask yourself, how did this individual have a gorgeous body? And I'm just going to let you know that the individual is a male dressing as a female. So, how does this gentleman, and not to say there aren't some gentlemen who dress as females that don't look like they have a gorgeous body, like, they wear, oh my gosh, I forgot what those things are called, like corsets and stuff like that to thin their sides so they have a more hourglass type figure like a female typically would, and stuff like that. It was just weird because this individual looks fairly husky, and that's like myself. I'm a pretty husky dude. Um, so it'd be like me putting on a red dress, and even with the best corset, there's no way anyone's gonna ever say I have a gorgeous female type body. That's just not gonna happen. So it's just there's a lot of weird things about this game, and so this woman drives me insane. So one of the things is you do see on day one at your partner's crime scene that there is a cigarette, and noticeably, Yo Money's girlfriend is smoking a cigarette. And I'm sure you're supposed to grab it, and I think you're supposed to grab it when that phone call comes because they both turn their back. And it happens fairly quickly that they turn their back, answer the phone, and as soon as I walked towards to get the cigarette, that phone call ended. So I wasn't able to get the cigarette. Again, I don't think it had any impact in the game because I was still able to solve the game, but I don't know if you're supposed to grab that cigarette because it does seem like you're supposed to because she's smoking and there's an ashtray in front of you. And it seems like, hey, you should grab that cigarette and turn it in for evidence and see if it's her, which clearly it's not. As I said, because could piece that out by the fact that when you show her the shoe, she says, hey, that's not my shoe. That is way too big to be my shoe. I'm not some skanky hoe, whatever. And even though Yo Money's like, yo, man, I brought in the hose, or however they phrased it in their very generic way that they wrote it, but he basically essentially alludes that, yeah, there were strippers and dancers. We had a big party. I couldn't even tell you whose shoe that was. So when you come to the morgue guy, he keeps telling you a bunch of information about John Doe's, your partner, and a Jane Doe that's found, and about the poison, about the glue, but nothing is really ever solidified. Like, I just felt like there was so much somehow missing. And there's also, I did have to look up one thing for a walkthrough where it appeared I was stuck. I was going to different places and everything seemed closed, or there was no more new responses. I couldn't get to certain areas, and it just felt like the day wasn't ending. And I looked real quick and it said, hey, you can hit a bug where it seems like the day doesn't end. Just go back through and do everything all over again. And so I literally went to each place I could go and repeated what I had done where I could. In some places I couldn't. Like I couldn't go to the junkyard because it appeared to be closed and there was a guard dog that prevented me from going into the junkyard. Couldn't go to the morgue because she was saying, hey, he's knee deep in an autopsy. You can't go see him now. But when I went to the strip club, I know I showed the owner of the strip club the shoe. And she said, it's not mine. It's way too big for me. This is a shoe that looks like it would fit you better than me. And so I know I'd shown her that because she said that dialogue. But as I basically made my way through and did all these places again, I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to do it again. I showed her my badge, showed her the shoe. But the second time, I heard the bling where it indicated a point had happened. So as I started making my way back around to see what that changed for me, suddenly at the morgue, it was different. There was like a newscaster out there and stuff like that. So I'd know for whatever reason, however I showed her the shoe the first time, I don't know if I didn't show her my badge first or something, or somehow there was a bug that did not show that, or it didn't indicate that I showed her the shoe, um, somehow triggered it. But it is really odd that I showed her the shoe. And if I remember when we get to that part, I'll say, there it is. There's me showing her the shoe the first time, me being stuck, can't go forward anywhere, me showing her the shoe the second time, now look at the morgue. Because that's the only thing that literally changed is me hearing the second time I showed her the chime. And this is the part I was talking about where the gun was super buggy in the way I moved it. Like I barely moved it, just like a minor twinge of like hair length, and suddenly it was like whee across the whole thing. So I was just unloading every time I fired. So again, one of the things I did like is you just go to an exit screen and you can go to a map. And for the most part, you can repeat most of the areas until, it says, hey, you can't. Now I came here to try to see if I was right about getting the cigarette and like showing them the shoe to see if that phone would ring again and make them turn their backs and that could be a little quicker. But apparently the only time you can try to get that cigarette is the first time that call comes because the phone doesn't ring again, despite them alluding to the fact that they're getting nonstop calls. And every time you reach for it, it says, hey, people are watching. Which, whatever. You're a cop, you're gathering evidence. Like, why would it care if they're watching? And this was another thing that was really stupid. Every time you left, you apparently took off your badge or your ID thing that indicated you're a cop. So every time you walked back into the park center, you had to go into your inventory, click on the badge thing, and click on yourself to basically put your ID, not your badge, but your ID thing back on to display. That just felt very monotonous. And essentially, anytime I talked to someone, I combined it, get some points, come over here, drop it off to him, and then just proceed to walk around, get the form again, walk around and see. So Yo Money talks about Dennis Walker, and you can go into your computer, and that's where you'll find out he seems to have a bit of history, and he is a part of a uh, racist organization. I think actually he's the leader, if I remember correctly. I can't. It's been a few days since I played it, but I believe he was like the leader or one of the high-ranking members of this white supremacy group, which you'll quickly see once you get into his apartment. So she talks about how she saw who was smoking. And see, even she says she was pretty. So this all makes it seem very much like it is a female, which is further evidence of like how did they not drop in more clues that who the killer ends up being when you find his file, that they mentioned he was into gardening and perhaps cross-dressing and stuff like that to give you more things to make that leap as to this attractive female is actually a male who is cross-dressing. And this is Dennis Walker's house. Knock on the door, show your badge. He says, "Come on in." And as you can see, a ton of white supremacy crap. And sarcastically, I saved it. Seems safe. Like, what's to worry about a white supremacist house where they spray paint this shit all over? Sorry, spray paint this stuff all over their wall. Might have to try to remember to censor that. I do try to keep this PG. So he says, "I can't hear you." Ask you to turn down the music. You quickly pull your gun. You think that's enough, but it's not. So when you go ahead and turn the music down, not only do you have to draw your gun, so he makes a break for it, and he gets to get away no matter what. There's no stopping him. So you have to talk to her, I think, twice to say, "Hey, stop what you're doing," and then drop the weapon, and then you cuff her. And the woman who comes out of the chief's office is um, the son, or I'm sorry, the mother of one of the newest victims that was found. And he had been stripped, and so she's complaining that something has to be done. Why was he stripped? Like, he's not a pervert. He wouldn't have been out naked or whatever. So once again, combining forms, give it to your partner, and you have to stand up because Lord forbid you just toss it to him, because no one does that. So again, open the drawers, take another form, and just keep going until the day ends. So clearly, I'm still missing something because the day has not switched over to, I think we'd be on Wednesday now. We're currently on Tuesday, I think. So I came down to talk to Chester because I try to talk to everyone, gather as much information every time. Like if someone gives me new information, I try to see if that opens tree dialogues with anyone else. So I'd gone down to talk to Chester, and she was not there. And so this is a home of your deceased partner and his wife. But when you go, no one answers. It happened too fast for me to notice, but I think that was the memo for the funeral of your partner, which you ended up missing because you were involved in that shootout. So essentially, you have to see the memo before she's available to talk to. And she basically says, "Hey, me and the kid need to get out of town, go visit family and stuff like that, and clear our heads," which is reasonable since her husband was killed and her daughter's father was killed in a fairly gruesome way, and definitely making the news that you can feel because the newscaster repeatedly shows up about the serial killer, especially as the body count begins to keep rising. And there it is, Christy Bilden from KKAT, where she is talking to Yo Money about the murders. Now, one of the things I did like, and you'll see it later on in the game, here I was just talking because I just assumed this is what we're supposed to do, kind of like Police Quest 3. You just talk to your partners and get to know one another. It seemed like a good opportunity, but it doesn't last very long. You get invited by Chester as well as I think the mortician guy. Both tell you to come to Shortstop. So I spent the entire time talking, and eventually the chief comes in, boop, and says, "Hey, you need to go to sleep because you need to speak to basically, I don't know if it's city council or basically like a city meeting, and you need to be sober at City Hall." There we go. So it's the next day, and he says, "Hey, do not F this up, but Also, don't give them any information that could jeopardize the case, which really, you don't know anything. There is essentially a way to address most people's concerns, and that's what I tried to do in this part. But you'll see it's not going to go very well for me here in a moment. And that is something about this game. It's like right there, it's the racist guy. He gets up and bam, gets me and kills me. As far as I can tell, he's just hitting me with a pipe. I don't know why that kills me and why no one else helps to restrain him. But that is one of the things about this game where at times you're going to die because there's no way you have your gun already selected. Like, why would you have your gun already selected at City Hall? But knowing now, after I've been attacked once and after these people talk, I'm about to be attacked, I know I need my gun probably ready to point at him and tell him to drop the weapon. Just like that. So there's no way anyone would have normally had that ready. So basically, you talk to him, you draw your weapon, talk to him a few times, tell him to get on his knees, and he surrenders. And that's some of the other weird stuff I thought is when the detective is involved in that shooting, where the one guy who said he would help you is gunned down. You don't gather any evidence or anything about it, and you don't really hear about it beyond that. And it's the same with this racist guy who was threatening your money, then threatens to attack you. Nothing ever comes of it. You don't do any research on him beyond what you found in the computer to get his address. Like, it's just I guess, just like a little side story in this game, just to show like the type of danger I guess a cop goes through, but doesn't really add too much to the actual story. It just muddies it a little more because you don't actually get anything out of it other than, successfully living. So you can tell some of the evidence that you find, even though you found that near a murder scene, he doesn't take it, so you know that you probably need to use it later for something else. Which, spoiler alert, I already kind of talked about it when you go to the strip club. So since it's Wednesday, we're going to go do the official final shoot. Make sure you grab the right form. So I saved here because I wasn't sure if a certain point on the range was needed, or if you literally just shoot a few times and still somehow continue through the game, or if it would basically end it. But as you can see, I am just trying to unload as quick as I can to get as many points as I can. Like, just firing away badly. That guy would not have a shoulder left if I was shooting him. But those guys are fine because I'm just shooting at the air, giving them warning shots. That was another thing. I don't think I ever used the clip and the gun together. Because every time I just end up just drawing my gun and telling him to sit down. The only time I think I actually fire is the shotgun from the trunk. So everyone you talk to in here, they're pretty much all cops. So when you show your badge, you're like, yeah, I'm a cop. Except for this guy, when you try to talk to him, it says, hey, you should try a more gentle approach with how big he is. So I end up just clicking on the different bowls, and there's actually pretzels in them. So you'll need those. But what was cool is if you put the loose change, there's two arcade games. You can actually play these arcade games. This one is pretty similar to, I want to say it's Space Quest 1, where you're driving down the desert and trying to avoid rocks. It's similar to the same idea. You're avoiding rocks, but you also want to get gas tanks that appear as they're falling down, as they're coming towards you. And as you can see, Sunny Bonds is right there in the high score. Now this is sped up, but I don't want to say I did great, but this certainly lasted much longer than I thought it would have. I just kept playing. I ended up getting like extra lives a few times. So this plays for a while of me basically playing Sierra's version of Asteroids. So I'll stop talking about it because it's just me flying around willy-nilly, just crazy flying, not even really trying. Because you can see I'm just pushing random directions and just firing. I'm not even concentrating on what I'm trying to be hitting, but I actually surprisingly did all right, um, despite that. So you can see I hit 1,000, I got an extra life, but I'll go ahead and stop talking about it so I know when I re-render this, I can just fast forward this part. So as you can see though, I did make it in the top score right there, Thomas. So that was actually kind of fun that you could actually play the arcade games. This only appeared in the CD version. In the disc version, you could not play the arcade games because not enough space probably on the disc space. So this took me a moment because it doesn't look like anyone's in the window, but he says, hey, you need the password. So try to show him the badge. He's like, well, that's fine, but you still need the password so I know that you're approved to actually look at the car. And this is the car of the one of the officers that was found on Yo Money's lot. His car was found abandoned with, I think, 2 naked people in the back. So you have to come back here, show him your license in the window, and he says something like, tell Beavis that Butthead sent him or something like that. And whoever did the voice of this guy did a really good job. He's pretty entertaining. It's very over the top, but entertaining. There is a news clipping that is between the seats, which is what you want to grab. Because what that news clipping will do when you read it is it'll give you the location of the strip club as well as the Third Eye Theater. And this guy was, I don't know why he's added in the game, other than to be extremely annoying. Because every time you come in, he tells you a really, really, really bad, not even a funny joke. He goes, ah, ha, 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 go on in. Like, why? Why is he there? So I did like how um, the one benefit, instead of like saying talk to so and so, like typing it out, the way they did this is they branch out the conversation. So it would have like 3 options, like tell me about John Doe, 102.L, tell me about Jane Doe. And when you click on John Doe and he tells you about John Doe, that opens up a tree to find out more information about John Doe, like his lividity, like what was the condition of his body, what was the scars on his body, what was XYZ. So I like that part, and then you just go to something and you click on something else, and then you can ask about Jane Doe, for example, and then it would open that same similar tree menu for Jane Doe. So it made it easier in that regard to try to get information, but sometimes you were looking for something more, and if you could just type what you needed, it would have been far more helpful. But probably because there is voice acting in it, it makes it very difficult to just willy-nilly anything to type, because they would have had to record those lines. And pretty much every time you talk to the gentleman at the morgue, it's just a good idea to click your notebook on him, I guess, because it always talks about how he's a wealth of information. So when you go to the park, there is a dog, and it won't let you get near the crime scene up there. So that's when I was like, do dogs do dogs even eat pretzels? Whatever. And so made a note of the crime scene, but then I thought, well, there's a dog here. So ended up clicking the crime scene and there's a bone. Now, this is something I also once again don't understand is this bone, they'll tell you later on in the game, is related to the Jane Doe that was found slumped against this tree. Now, the way they made it sound is that Jane's Doe body had a bunch of. So here's that scene I was talking about where she's not at the front desk. And look at that skirt. Like, she looks like she would not be wearing a skirt that tight. Anyway, so as I was saying, they talk about how this bone eventually, after you turn it in, is tied to Jane Doe, who was found slumped against that tree. And the way they describe it is that Jane's Doe body, she had the same bruising, the cuts, the either she had her eyes glued or her mouth glued or her ears glued. One of the something, some orifice was glued. But what's weird is when you find the bone, he makes no mention that, hey, detective, she's missing her left bone for her leg or her left whatever, her left femur, whatever. If femurs have lefts or right, I don't even know. I just know that's a bone. So it's weird that it feels like her body was just basically in a state of recently killed versus why is there a bone that ties to her? Unless I'm misremembering or misunderstanding how he phrased like the bone was tied to Jane Doe. But it literally sounds like why would there be a bone there unless she was like severely decomposed and the dog had buried the bone? Just to, as a playful thing that dogs do of burying bones. I felt like that was really weird. Like, why would he not have explained Jane Doe's condition of her leg was missing a bone, her arm was missing a bone, something along the lines that her body was missing a bone to know that maybe I should go click on there and dig and move the soil around. I happened to just click it because a dog was guarding it, being protective, and I thought, what do dogs do? Dogs bury bones. And I vaguely remember something when I played Police Quest 4. I think I've only ever played this game like 3 times total. This would be my 4th time. Just because it's so procedure driven that I didn't enjoy always playing this game. I would rather play like Leisure Suit Larry or Space Quest, something that was very easy, very fun, very lighthearted. So I just happened to click on the dirt and think that a dog buried a bone and whatever. So anyway, you show up. This is where the Bitty Kitty is, which is a strip club, and there's also a music store here. There is a gentleman here outside who seems to be a gentleman who enjoys the company of other gentlemen. What's weird is you talk to him and he gives you some pretty vague information. But then I think it's when you exit the Bitty Kitty, he looks like he's trying to break into your car and he breaks off your mirror and it's visible that the mirror is sitting on the ground. But why? Like, why would this guy do that knowing that you identified yourself as an officer of the law? Why would he even risk breaking into a cop's car? It didn't make sense to me, like a number of other different things in this game. All right, so let's take close note of being at the strip club. This is the first person you talk to. So I show her my badge, you hear the ling. And hopefully YouTube does not pick up that in the background there is actually a topless dancer, but you really can't see much. And it's so weird when she talks, her mouth doesn't move, she just turns her head. And see, that person is trying to take your mirror or break into your car. And then he essentially drives for a whole day without replacing his mirror, which I'm pretty sure is also illegal. So what I failed to notice is right there in the tray, when I was in there, there's actually a lighter. And I won't actually pick it up until a little bit later. So now I've shown her the shoe. So I've identified myself and I've shown her not my shoe, the shoe. And she says, you got a light. And I failed to, like, I looked to see if I had lighter matches and I don't. And I failed to see the lighter sitting in the ashtray. So I just leave. Leave her hanging. She wants that light, but I ain't that guy. So now we're at the record store. And I do the same thing. So it's going to pause here for a second because it says replace. And what I'm actually doing is I'm tabbing into the game directory to copy the current save games into a folder called PQ4SG1 so that when I go back in and save, it's now empty because now it thinks there is no save game. So I identify myself, talk to the guy, try to get some questions because the abandoned car was left outside his store pretty much, as you find out as you talk to him. And so he talks about how in the back seat there were two naked people. He thought they were just, it's Hollywood. It's just people getting their freak on. But as he goes back out later, they're still in the back seat, but there's no motion of the car indicating they are not getting their freak on. So after talking to him, we can come back here, and there is the owner of. So I've identified myself, and she pretty much says, "Hey, I don't talk to cops." And then you pretty much convince her, "All right, what about off the record?" And I show her the shoe. So I've identified myself, and I've shown her the shoe, as I said. But there was no chime to the point thing, the cling. But she clearly spoke and said, "Hey, it's not my shoe. It's too big. It better fit you." So clearly there's something, a bug here that I somehow found where I would actually have to come back and do this again to trigger her actually indicating that she's seen it and triggering the next set of events. And they overdid this guy and how often he says dude. Now, as someone who grew up in San Diego, especially in the 80s, I did say dude a lot. But this dude, purposely said that, says the word dude very frequently. He's like, "Hey, what's up, dude? Hey, I don't know what that is, dude. Okay, dude. Whatever you want, dude. All right, dude." It's like they don't realize that if you're clicking on a threaded conversation, how often he's saying dude. Like, I get that they're trying to indicate that he says dude a lot, but this dude said dude way too often. And again, I grew up in San Diego for the majority of my life. I was definitely a California kid, and I was one of those people who said dude a lot. And I felt like this guy said dude too often. And so here we are, and this is what I'm talking about where I essentially got stuck. So like I said, I've shown her the badge, and I've shown her the shoe. And I guess that's supposed to be the trigger to start what happens here at the morgue. Because when you go to the morgue and you try to go in, she says, "Hey, he's knee deep in autopsies." So I'm kind of scanning around to see, well, where should I go next? And I just started clicking places to talk to different people and do different things. Like maybe I'm supposed to click on a record or ask him about my broken mirror or just whatever. And he pretty much says all the same things. So clearly I've already talked to this guy. I've looked at all the clippings. I've obviously read this newspaper clipping or else I would not have known. And he says, yeah, that looks like a shoe. So I identify myself again. and proceed to go through the dialogue tree. Everything seems the same. Nothing new. So I just continue going through the different places, doing all the same things that I had already done to see what was broken. And as I said later on, when I go back and I identify myself and once again show her the shoe, you'll hear the chime for the score. You may not, because I may be over talking, but I try to leave the volume of the game reduced. So if I'm not talking, of course, that happens to be a quiet part, you can still hear a little bit of the game and you can hear the chime. And once again, she says he's knee deep in autopsies, so can't see him. So just make my way around the map, see where I can go, what I can do. Over here, knock on the door, and no answer. So things are quickly running out of what I can do. She essentially tells you, stop hanging out here. You're bad for business if you're not going to buy anything. No one outside, no one answering the door. Can't go to the junkyard because the dog is barking. And I literally made a note or a save game that says the day is not ending because the places I can go are having no impact. So this is essentially where I read about how you can essentially bug and just go back and do everything. So identify myself again, show her the shoe. And now suddenly the reporter's there and she's interviewing the mortician's assistant, which is the indication of the end of the day, just as a spoiler. This is what needed to happen. So apparently going back and showing the proprietor of the Bitty Kitty a second time that I'm a cop and found this red shoe was what needed to happen. Like the first time, apparently she wasn't convinced. So she goes on to talk about how everyone in the city is gripped in fear. People are buying guns to defend themselves, and the whole city's in terror. Wondering if they're the next, because the first two bodies were um, officers, and now the next two bodies were random citizens. So as always, every time it's a new day, go back to everyone that you're able to talk to gather as much information as you can. Like I said, despite trying to do that every time it was a new day, I still felt like there were huge gaps of information, and the player is forced to make some leaps and actually use player knowledge versus actual game knowledge. Because, like, for example, when you go, we're about to head here shortly, when you go to the Third Eye Theater, you can tell the music inside the theater is very creepy, which gives the player a clue. Hey, something's really weird with this guy, right? Like, do you notice the music change and it got really creepy? So there's a little bit of player knowledge that plays into how you jump to the conclusions that you do versus for a game that was so focused on police procedure seemed to miss the point of actually trying to tie some of that into creating a much cleaner, clearer story. So when you go here on Wednesday, where you first find out about this place, it does say that the place is closed, so you do have to wait until Thursday to get there. And when you talk to this guy, he sounds so shy, so timid, has like a stuttering issue. Um, the way he speaks, but if you watch the long play and get to this part, you can tell that the music gets kind of creepy. It reminds me very much of, if anyone watched the original He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, it reminded me very much of every time they essentially showed Snake Mountain, which belonged to Skeletor. The music had a very similar vibe of this evil kind of presence. And when you try to go to the bathroom, it says, oh, there's an overwhelming smell, which you never really find out what that is either because you don't ever get to go in there. So when you go in here, you do find a red dress, but again, um, why would you suspect that it's him? Because everyone keeps talking about how it's an attractive female. And I actually had difficulty trying to find my way out of the theater, which would have just been down. But there's even a part where you go down and it says, nah, it's all right. You don't want to go that way. See, so I'd try to walk down and go down into this hallway instead of actually walking down. And when I did down center, it didn't go. You actually have to click all the way below, like the Police Quest logo. So once again, you show your badge and he gives you a new password so you can go investigate this car. And this car is pretty much clean, but what you need to do is look at the license plate. Now, what's weird is I almost thought they were trying to do something dirty here, as in to imply too busy to then 69, but 669. I don't know what that would be if they're trying to be sly and get something dirty through. But it certainly looks like the first part is too busy to, but then 669. It's the only part I didn't get. Like should have been too busy 269 or something like that. So now that you have the license plate, you're going to want to go to the computer, log in, and put that license plate in the DMV section. And you'll actually find out who owns the car and the address. So you find out that this car is registered to this district of health, and you're going to go here and talk to this young woman after identifying herself to see who owns this car, and you find out that it is a woman who spends half her time in the office, half the time driving because she does social work and like kid care or health checks on kids and stuff like that to ensure everything is good. And so you find out eventually that she is the Jane Doe that recently turned up. So you follow her to her office, and she says, if you need anything, I'll be at my desk. So try to click around, click around, click around. But when you look at her desk, it'll zoom in, and you see like a cassette tape with a receipt and some paperwork. The paperwork you can't take, the tape you can, and the envelopes you can. Now, when you look at the envelopes, one will be about the proprietor of the Bitty Kitty, the woman in the red dress that you see, and the other one is about the owner slash manager. I'm assuming he's like a manager of the Third Eye Theater. And when you look at the tape, it's essentially a receipt of Yo Money's tape. So apparently she was going to return it to the record store that you were at that's next to the Bitty Kitty. So it's perfect convenience. But you can come back to her and talk to her, and you find out that essentially she hasn't shown up to work in a few days. Not the person that you're talking to, obviously, but the woman whose car that you found and had been impounded, and you eventually learn that she is the Jane Doe. Which leads to the confusion I was talking about earlier, that if she had only been missing for a few days, why was her bone located under her body? And why does the doctor, or not the doctor, sorry, the mortician never say anything about the condition of her body with a leg bone or arm bone or whatever bone it was that was missing? So you take the tape back. You have to talk to him or look at him first. And he says, hey, no cash back. We just do even trades. So you just took a dead woman's cassette tape, which might be evidence, and just returned it to him. And when you look at the case, the only thing that really stands out is a drumstick. It's the only option that you can take is essentially the drumstick, I believe. So you find out that she has some legal issues that she's trying to take care of, stuff like that. Involves her child. I can't remember if it's a son or a daughter. But essentially, it's a ugly divorce case. And you find out, and this never comes into play, that her ex-husband is an officer of the law, but she refuses to name him because she doesn't want more trouble. Again, this is something that never comes into play, so you never find out who her ex-husband really is. Or if you do, I didn't find out because I may have missed something. And so when I return, the lighter is randomly there. Which I thought, oh, maybe it's evidence. Get some fingerprints off the lighter since her and the other woman have both touched it, probably. But nope. You just pick it up. And it's funny, what that lighter is used for is something that I'm very familiar with, because in the 80s, hairspray was a big thing. And there was video on my personal YouTube channel where I essentially sprayed hairspray all over my hand and then lit it on fire, because the hairspray basically prevented my hand from actually burning, but the heat from the fire does not prevent my hand from burning. So it's a pretty funny video of me being stupid in my youth. I also sprayed it like on my jeans and then lit it on fire. Tried to do like what was like a Motley Crue thing back in the day. Oh, youth and stupidity go hand in hand. I sometimes wonder how I made it to the ripe age that I am, which is old. If you've seen my photo, you know I have a big gray beard. So once again, we're here talking to him because one of the files that we found is a file on him. So now I'm just wandering around. And one thing that I noticed that was different is on the box suddenly there is a rope. That was not there before. So now I'm wandering around trying to see where the next trigger is. Once again, Mortician's too busy to see us. He is knee-deep in autopsies. So trying to figure out where the next trigger is because everything seems to be dead ending for me. So this is where I mysteriously figured out to I put the glue on the mirror first, I believe, thinking fix the mirror, but then it says you get points and it doesn't do anything. So I said, I'll put glue on the drumstick and make like a little mirror thing. And sure enough, that's what it was. And I was trying to see if there was like a hidden key or something up here. Yeah. Couldn't remember what this crazy contraption was for. I knew it was essentially for looking around something because that's what you need a 180-degree type mirror for. But overall, I'm literally just running around, once again, feeling like the day is not ending and stuck in another loop. I think it ends up being the record label guy. Like, I don't think I clicked on one of the tree conversations to unlock the next series of events. Or it might have been him. I think I had to talk to him. Like he's, oh, yes, it was him. There's something where he says it's so sad, and I think I forgot to click that tree. Yeah. And then you end up telling her that, hey, your social worker is dead, and he feigns to cry. his neighbors. She had come to help settle an argument between him and his neighbors, who said his dog is too thin and they never feed him. And he's like, I just need to calm down. I'll have some tea. Do you want some? And you drink the tea, and he said, you know what? Why don't you watch a free movie? And it's really weird because as a cop, you're on this murder case and you just have time to sit down and watch a movie where you dream about a man in a red dress. And no offense to this gentleman, but with that chest hair, I'm not sure how anyone saw him or her as attractive. And it's unusual because he knows you have information on him. There's his opportunity to kill you if he is the killer that you would think he is. Spoiler alert, he is the killer. Why didn't he kill you there? Like, he had you unconscious, which I assume is how he took care of the other cops. And after you drink the tea and stuff like that, it triggers the dog, which then you use the rope and he runs you around and you end up in an alley that you have never been in before. And if you want to leave, you can't. You literally have to find the door to get out of this alley. And you see the dog go through a dog door. And so I was trying to pry gates open and stuff like that. And there's a very specific spot you need to click on with your crowbar. But anyway, as I was saying, it's just really weird that you're asking questions, and he literally even says, "Why are you asking so many questions?" And you explain about how the social worker that had been working with him is dead, and he essentially knocks you out with that tea, which is how I assume he knocked out the other cops and his other victims who were probably coming to this theater. He would give them this specific tea. Like some people, they fall asleep at a theater. And these people who drank this tea that he had targeted fell asleep longer, and he probably looked for people who were alone to be able to target them and kill them. But I feel like this is me making those jumps to get to this point of the story. This is in no way explained in the story at all that this is how he was targeting these people. Like, they were people coming to the theater who were passing away. Like, there were so many opportunities, I feel like, as I've said before throughout this almost 2-hour video, where I feel like they could have done a better job trying to connect all of this. So this is where you have to use your flashlight to, once you pry the gate open, and then you use the clipper thing to pry the locked door open, and you open the fridge, and there's a head inside the fridge. Ah, panic! So you take a note of it. Which is another thing that seems very weird, because all of his previous victims, they do talk about detachment of the limbs, like some person's missing a hand, one person's missing a foot, stuff like that. But at no point is anyone missing like a head, so this is the first head that's been severed. And so once again, the dog that pulled you through and who has been in that park is in the way, and you give him your partner's pills that you found in the pocket, which, going back to that real quick, you just randomly search your partner's closet at his house and go through his coat, but when you try to click on other things, it says, hey, you should respect their privacy. I just literally went through his coat pocket. Like, you're telling me to respect his privacy if I click on something else? It just seems very odd. But anyway, one of the items you get is those pills, which help him relax, or helped your partner relax. And you give it to the dog to knock the dog out, which allows you to basically get past it, and you see a woman sleeping. And you would think, maybe we call this in, maybe we do something, hang out with her, protect her. No, you just leave and you walk around. And earlier I'd clicked on the different soda cans, and the two of them said, hey, they're glued there. On the third one, the guy says, hey, are you looking for something? So I clicked on it, and you click on it again to shake it, and there's a key inside, and it's a skeleton key. So when you go back, you notice that the dress is gone, and so you have the skeleton key. Like, what does it open? Try on that door. It says it doesn't open it. So you know the skeleton key has to hide something or unlock something. So I just started clicking on stuff and said, hey, I wonder if the soap dispenser or the paper towel dispenser has something in it. And again, I've probably only ever played Police Quest total. This would have been probably my fourth time because it is very realistic. It's not something that's a game that I would normally play to relax, and it's so done by the rules. You have to do all these specific things in a specific order. It's not as fun as, say, Leisure Suit Larry or Space Quest, which is just a very relaxing, very fun, not serious type of game, which is much easier to play when you just want to play something to be brainless and not really think of stuff. So sure enough, inside there is a syringe, which is why he's hiding it. And then now you see him running away with the woman who was asleep, who you could have saved had you called in for backup at some point and just got cops here. But no, that's not going to happen. So you go to this side door and it says it's locked. So let's go try the other door, see if it opens that one, because it is a skeleton key. And sure enough, it opens that door. Once again, you find yourself in darkness. This time you are punched in the face. Once again, he has you vulnerable. He's knocked you out. And once again, he does not kill you. This is twice that an officer that has been questioning him, he has at his mercy and doesn't kill. So you end up going into the bathroom because he's taken all your inventory items. So all you get is essentially the lighter and the can of hairspray. Now, why he put the lighter in the dude's mouth is beyond me. It makes no sense to me, but you essentially combine the lighter and the hairspray to make a flamethrower, which is like, as I said, I used to do this in the 80s, and you spray it on him, and because he has a wig and hairspray on, he quickly bursts into flame, and that's how you defeat him. So again, I'm not even sure if any of the paperwork that you have to do really matters, other than just triggering the next event. And having found the killer, your partner's wife shows up, the kid shows up, your partner's wife's child runs up and hugs you, and we get the credits. Like, there's so many leaps in this game that you're forced to really make to jump to that conclusion, and then it comes really fast. Like, suddenly you're like, okay, I'm pretty sure it's this guy, and all this stuff. Like, there's no real clues that lead up to it, and there's just different aspects of the game that I felt like could have been done better. Anyway, if you enjoyed this, as always, please click like, subscribe, tell other people, check it out, share it around. I would love it because I'd love to have more subscribers to be aware of this. This does take a long time to do. For example, the non-commentary version was 8 hours long. This took over 12 hours to render. And then what I do is I take that, upload it, which was 37 gigs, which took a while to upload. And then I take that, speed it up for my commentary versions, re-render that, which usually takes a couple hours, and that's usually a couple gigs as well, upload that. So it is some time and effort on my behalf, and I would love if more people saw it and took time to comment and like, subscribe, and share. And my dog is barking in the background. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here, and have a good day. Bye.